My name is Joanna, 32 years old, and I'm standing in the marble foyer of my parents' $40 million estate watching federal agents carry out box after box of evidence. Just 24 hours ago, they threw my suitcase onto this same floor and told me to never come back. You want to destroy our legacy? Then get out, my mother had screamed. Now their empire lies in ruins and they're begging me to save them. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before I dive into this incredible story of betrayal, greed, and ultimately justice, I want to know where you're watching from today. Are you someone who's faced family betrayal? Have you ever had to choose between blood and doing what's right? Hit that like button if you believe truth matters more than family ties. And don't forget to subscribe because this story will show you exactly why standing alone with integrity beats standing together in corruption. Trust me, what happened in those 24 hours will leave you speechless. Growing up as a Wellington meant living in a world where money solved everything, and appearances mattered more than truth. My parents, Martin and Louise Wellington, had built an empire spanning luxury hotels, high-end restaurants, and prime real estate across 3 states. To the outside world, we were the American dream personified. Behind closed doors, we were a family built on secrets, lies, and carefully orchestrated deceptions. I'd spent 8 years as the chief financial officer of Wellington Enterprises, after graduating from Wharton with my MBA. My parents had groomed me to take over, or so I thought. They praised my attention to detail, my ability to spot inconsistencies, my talent for making numbers tell stories. Little did they know these very skills would become their downfall. It started innocently enough 3 months before that fateful New Year's Eve. I was reviewing quarterly reports when I noticed unusual patterns in our vendor payments. Companies I'd never heard of were receiving substantial sums for services that seemed vague at best. My initial thought was simple oversight, perhaps new ventures I hadn't been briefed on. But as I dug deeper, the rabbit hole revealed itself to be more of an abyss. Fake vendors with addresses that led to empty lots. Invoices for renovations at properties we didn't own. Offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands receiving regular transfers disguised as consulting fees. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. My parents weren't just cutting corners. They were orchestrating a massive fraud scheme that implicated our entire business structure. I spent weeks gathering evidence, creating spreadsheets, backing up documents. Part of me hoped I was wrong, that there was some legitimate explanation. But every piece of evidence pointed to the same conclusion: the Wellington Empire was built on criminal foundations. And my parents were the architects of this deception. New Year's Eve arrived with its usual fanfare at the Wellington estate. Hundreds of guests in designer gowns and custom tuxedos filled our ballroom. Champagne flowing like water, everyone eager to toast to another year of Wellington prosperity. I watched my father Martin work the room with his practiced charm, his silver hair gleaming under the crystal chandeliers, his handshake firm and confident with every business partner and politician in attendance. My mother Louise glided through the crowd in her emerald gown, her smile never wavering, her laugh perfectly timed. She'd always been the master of social manipulation, knowing exactly what to say to make people feel important, while extracting whatever she needed from them. Tonight, watching her perform, I felt sick to my stomach. I'd chosen this night deliberately. With all their key investors and partners present, I thought the public nature of the event might force some accountability. How naive I was. I pulled my parents aside into Martin's study just before midnight, my hands trembling as I laid out the evidence on his mahogany desk. "What is this supposed to be?" Martin's voice was ice cold as he glanced at the documents. Not shocked, not confused, just cold. That's when I knew he was fully aware of everything. Dad, these are records of fraudulent transactions going back years. We need to come clean, make restitution. If we self-report now, maybe we can minimize the damage. My voice sounded stronger than I felt. Louise's reaction was a pure theater. Her eyes welled with tears as she pressed a hand to her chest. How could you do this to us, Joanna? After everything we've given you. The education, the position, the life of privilege. This isn't about what you've given me. This is about what you've stolen from others. Employees, investors, partners who trusted you. I stood my ground even as my heart raced. That's when my brother Mike entered the study, his face flushed from champagne. What's going on? Mom texted me to come immediately. He was 35, 3 years older than me, but had never shown interest in the business beyond his generous allowance. Your sister is trying to destroy our family, Martin said flatly, his eyes never leaving mine. Show him, Joanna. Show your brother how you want to tear down everything we've built. Mike glanced at the papers, his expression shifting from confusion to anger. Are you insane? You want to ruin us over some paperwork, Joanna? This is how business works. Stop making trouble. My younger sister, Katie, appeared in the doorway, 28 years old, and recently engaged to a senator's son. She took one look at the scene and immediately backed away. I don't want any part of this, she muttered, disappearing into the hallway. You have a choice, Martin said, straightening his bow tie. Destroy those documents, forget what you think you've found, and continue being part of this family. Or pursue this foolish crusade and lose everything. I've already made copies, I said quietly. Digital backups, physical copies, and a safe deposit box. Dad, we can fix this. We can make it right. Louise's tears vanished instantly, replaced by a sneer that transformed her beautiful face into something ugly. You ungrateful little bitch, we made you. Without us, you're nothing. Then I guess I'll have to be nothing, I replied, my voice steady despite my shattering heart. Martin walked to his desk, pulled out his phone, and made a call. Security, please come to my study immediately. He looked at me with eyes devoid of any paternal warmth. You want to destroy our legacy, then get out. You're no longer our daughter. You're no longer a Wellington. 2 security guards entered, men I'd known since childhood who'd watched me grow up in this house. Their faces were apologetic but firm as Martin instructed them to escort me to my room to pack a single suitcase and then remove me from the property. You have 10 minutes, Louise said coldly. Take only your personal items. Your car belongs to the company. Your credit cards are being canceled as we speak. Your accounts will be frozen by morning. I packed in a daze, throwing essentials into a suitcase while one of the guards stood in my doorway. 10 minutes to pack up 32 years of life. I grabbed my laptop, some clothes, my grandmother's necklace, and a photo album from college. Everything else would remain in this prison disguised as paradise. The scene in the marble foyer was deliberately orchestrated for maximum humiliation. Guests had begun to notice the commotion, gathering in small groups to whisper and stare. Martin emerged from his study and addressed the crowd with his politician's smile. Just a small family matter, nothing to concern yourselves with. Please enjoy the party. But Louise wasn't satisfied with quiet removal. As the guards prepared to walk me out, she grabbed my suitcase and hurled it onto the floor, the locks popping open and scattering my belongings across the marble. There's your inheritance, she spat. Get out of my house and never come back. I knelt to gather my things, my hands shaking as I stuffed clothes back into the suitcase. Not a single guest moved to help. These people who'd known me since I was a child, who'd attended my graduations and birthdays, stood frozen like statues. Only Katie appeared at the top of the stairs, her face pale, but she quickly retreated when Louise shot her a warning glare. As I walked through the front door into the cold New Year's night fireworks exploding overhead in mockery of celebration. I heard Martin's final words. "You're dead to us, Joanna. If you pursue this, we'll destroy you in ways you can't imagine." The locks clicked behind me with finality. I stood on the doorstep of my childhood home suitcase in hand, car keys, confiscated phone, already buzzing with notifications of canceled credit cards. But in my laptop bag, encrypted and backed up in multiple locations, was evidence that would bring their empire crashing down. They thought they'd won by casting me out. They had no idea they'd just started a 24-hour countdown to their own destruction. The champagne bubbles from the party were still rising toward the sky as I dragged my suitcase down the long driveway. My phone's battery was already draining from the constant notifications of financial accounts being systematically shut down. Each ping felt like another door slamming in my face. By the time I reached the main road, my designer heels had left my feet bleeding, but physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional devastation of being erased by my own family. I managed to call an Uber with my last functioning credit card before it too was declined. The driver, a kind woman named Maria, took one look at my tear-stained face and designer dress and didn't ask questions. She drove me to the nearest motel that would accept cash, even helped me carry my suitcase to the door. "Whatever happened, honey," she said softly. "Tomorrow's a new day." If only she knew how prophetic those words would be. The roadside inn was a far cry from the Wellington luxury hotels. Flickering neon cigarette-burned carpets and a bed that creaked with every movement. But it was shelter, and more importantly, it had working Wi-Fi. I opened my laptop and began securing my evidence, uploading files to multiple cloud servers, emailing encrypted copies to a dummy account. Then I made the call I'd been dreading, but knew was necessary. Madeline Cho had been the Wellington family lawyer for 15 years. More than that, she'd been my mentor, the woman who'd encouraged me to get my MBA, who'd taught me to read between the lines of contracts and financial statements. If anyone would understand the gravity of what I'd discovered and help me navigate the legal minefield ahead, it would be her. "Joanna, it's past midnight. What's wrong?" Her voice was alert despite the hour, probably used to Wellington family drama.
"I need to see you. First thing tomorrow. It's about the company Madeline. I found something terrible." I tried to keep my voice steady.
"Slow down. Where are you?" I heard there was some commotion at the party. "They threw me out. Mom and Dad, they kicked me out because I found evidence of fraud. Major fraud. Money laundering, fake vendors, the works." The words tumbled out in a rush. There was a pause on the other end. "That's a serious accusation, Joanna. Are you sure you haven't misunderstood? Sometimes financial records can be complex, easy to misinterpret." "I have 8 years of financial experience, Madeline. I know what I'm looking at. Can we meet tomorrow? I'll show you everything." "Of course. How about the Starbucks on 5th Street, 10 a.m.? She sounded concerned now. "And Joanna, be careful. If what you're saying is true, this could be dangerous." I barely slept that night, jumping at every sound in the hallway, checking and rechecking that my door was locked and chained. When morning finally came, I dressed in the only business casual outfit I'd managed to pack and took another expensive cab to the meeting spot, watching my cash reserves dwindle with every mile. Madeline was already there when I arrived, her usual power suit impeccable, her expression unreadable behind designer sunglasses. She stood when she saw me, pulling me into a brief hug that felt stiffer than usual. "You look exhausted," she said, guiding me to a corner table. I pulled out my laptop, angling the screen so she could see. "Look at this. Shell companies billing for services never rendered. Offshore accounts receiving millions in consulting fees that trace back to criminal organizations. Dad's been laundering money, Madeline. Mom's been helping him cook the books." She studied the documents carefully, her expression growing more serious with each page. This is comprehensive, she finally said. How long have you been compiling this?
3 months.
I have everything. Transaction records, email correspondence, even some recorded phone calls from board meetings where they discussed it openly, thinking the room wasn't wired. I leaned forward urgently. We need to go to the FBI. If we self-report, it might help with sentencing. Madeline closed the laptop gently, her manicured hand resting on top. Joanna, I need you to listen very carefully. These documents could be interpreted many different ways. What looks like fraud to you might simply be creative accounting tax optimization strategies that push boundaries but remain legal. I stared at her in disbelief. Madeline, you taught me the difference between aggressive accounting and criminal fraud. This is clearly the latter. She removed her sunglasses, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Fear mixed with calculation. Your father called me last night. He's concerned about your mental state. The stress of the job, the pressure of living up to the Wellington name. He mentioned you've been working excessive hours, not sleeping well.
What are you talking about? My blood ran cold.
He also shared some concerning medical records. Prescriptions for anxiety medication that therapist you saw last year after your breakdown. She pulled a folder from her briefcase documents I recognized with growing horror. That wasn't a breakdown. I saw a therapist for 3 sessions after a bad breakup. And the anxiety medication was for a fear of flying. Madeline, you know me. You know I'm not unstable.
I know what the documents say,
she replied carefully. And I know that if you pursue this reckless course, these documents will become part of a very public narrative about a disturbed young woman who couldn't handle the pressure and turned on her own family.
The betrayal hit me like a physical blow.
They got to you. How much did they pay you? Her composure cracked slightly. It's not about money, Joanna. It's about survival. Your parents have connections you can't imagine. Judges, prosecutors, media moguls. If you go against them, they won't just discredit you. They'll destroy you. So you're going to help them. My voice was barely a whisper. I'm going to offer you some advice as someone who genuinely cares about you. She leaned back, crossing her legs. Destroy whatever copies you have. Apologize to your parents. Maybe they'll take you back, give you a position in their European operations. You could start fresh, and let them continue stealing. Let them keep laundering money for criminals. I started to pack up my laptop, my hands shaking with rage and disappointment. The alternative is worse, Madeline said quietly. They've already frozen your accounts. By tomorrow, your credit will be ruined. No reputable firm will hire you once they start spreading stories about your instability. And that's if you're lucky. If you're unlucky... She let the threat hang in the air. I stood up, clutching my laptop bag. I thought you were different. I thought you had integrity. Integrity is a luxury for people who don't know how the real world works. She replied sadly. Joanna, please. Think about what you're doing. Once you cross this line, there's no going back. Then I guess I'm crossing it, I said, turning to leave. They know about the safety deposit box, she called after me. And the cloud storage. They have people working on accessing everything. You have maybe 48 hours before they find it all. I froze at the door. Are you threatening me? I'm trying to save your life, she said simply. Your parents play for keeps, Joanna. And right now you're playing alone. I left the coffee shop in a daze, Madeline's betrayal cutting deeper than my family's rejection. She'd been right about one thing, though. Within hours, the full weight of the Wellington machinery turned against me. My company email was deleted, wiping out 8 years of correspondence and contacts. My phone started receiving calls from numbers I didn't recognize, hanging up when I answered. Former colleagues who'd been friends suddenly wouldn't return my texts. Luke Patterson, who'd have been my right hand in the finance department, finally answered after my 5th attempt. Joanna, I can't talk to you, he said immediately. Luke, please, you know me. You've seen the books. You know something's wrong. I was sitting in my motel room feeling the walls close in.
I know that security escorted you out last night and that HR sent a memo saying you're under investigation for embezzlement. They're saying you stole from the company that you created false records to cover it up. His voice was strained.
What? That's insane. I'm the one who discovered the fraud. They're just turning it around on me. I couldn't believe how fast they were moving. Maybe, but I have a family, Joanna. A mortgage. I can't afford to be associated with whatever this is. I'm sorry. He paused. They're watching everyone who is close to you. Marshall got pulled into a meeting this morning. They're looking for accomplices. Accomplices to what? Telling the truth. But the line had already gone dead. My sister Katie was the only family member whose number still worked. Her text came through that evening, short and cryptic. They're saying you stole $3 million. Dad's filing charges tomorrow. They have evidence. Get a lawyer. Don't text back. I stared at the message in horror. They weren't just discrediting me. They were framing me for their own crimes. Every document I'd collected to prove their guilt would now be twisted to make me look like the criminal. I'd been so focused on gathering evidence, I'd never considered they might use the very same tactic against me. That night, someone tried to break into my motel room. I woke to the sound of someone working the lock, saw a shadow through the curtain. I grabbed my laptop and phone, slipped out the bathroom window in my pajamas, and ran barefoot through the freezing parking lot to hide behind a dumpster. 2 men in dark suits entered my room, and I could see their flashlights sweeping through the space. They left after 10 minutes, but the message was clear: I wasn't safe anywhere. I spent the rest of the night in my car in a 24-hour Walmart parking lot, using their Wi-Fi to research lawyers who might take my case. But Madeline had been right about the Wellington reach. Every attorney I found had some connection to my family, had done business with them, or simply wouldn't return calls once they heard my name. As dawn broke on January 2nd, I realized the true extent of my isolation. In 48 hours, I'd gone from CFO of a multi-million-dollar enterprise to a homeless fugitive accused of embezzlement. My parents hadn't just exiled me. They'd orchestrated a complete character assassination that would make any truth I tried to tell look like the desperate lies of a caught criminal. But they'd made one mistake. In their arrogance, they'd assumed I'd crumble without their support, that I'd come crawling back begging for forgiveness. They didn't know that every betrayal, every threat, every false accusation only strengthened my resolve. I'd lost my family, my mentor, my career, and my home. I had nothing left to lose, and that made me dangerous in ways they couldn't anticipate. The Wellington public relations machine was a thing of terrifying beauty. By January 3rd, my face was splashed across business blogs and local news sites, always paired with words like alleged, disturbed, and betrayal of trust. The narrative was expertly crafted. Joanna Wellington, given every advantage in life, had succumbed to greed and mental instability, attempting to steal from the very family that had nurtured her success. I watched from the public library computer as my professional reputation was methodically destroyed. LinkedIn connections disappeared by the dozens. My Wharton alumni page was flooded with shocked comments from people I'd never met. Someone had even created a fake Twitter account in my name, posting increasingly unhinged messages about conspiracy theories and family persecution. But it was the photo that broke me. Splashed across the Wellington Industries website was a picture from last year's charity gala. I stood between my parents, smiling broadly. Champagne glass raised. The caption read, "The Wellington family before January's unfortunate incident. The company is cooperating fully with authorities regarding internal financial irregularities, They'd already written me out of the family history, reduced me to an incident. I was so focused on the screen that I almost missed the woman who sat down next to me. Lillian Chen, my father's vice president of operations, looked nothing like her usual polished self. Her designer suit was replaced with jeans and a baseball cap. Her signature red lipstick notably absent. "Don't look at me," she whispered, pretending to browse a nearby magazine. "Just listen. Your father's not as smart as he thinks he is." My heart raced, but I kept my eyes on the screen. "Why are you here?" "Because in about 72 hours, I'm going to be exactly where you are now. Or worse." She slipped a USB drive onto the desk beside my hand. "Security footage from the executive floor. Password is your grandmother's maiden name."
"Why would you help me?" I palmed the drive, still not looking at her. "I'm not helping you. I'm saving myself. Your father's about to throw me under the bus for the entire operation. I've been his mistress for 3 years, Joanna. I know where all the bodies are buried, and now he wants to bury me too." The revelation about the affair didn't surprise me. I'd suspected for years, noticed the looks, the late meetings, the way my mother's smile grew sharper whenever Lillian's name was mentioned. "What's on the drive?" "Proof that this goes deeper than you imagined. Your brother Mike isn't just complicit. He's been running his own side operation. Skimming from the skim, if you will. He owes almost $2 million to some very unforgiving people in Atlantic City." She stood up, adjusting her cap. "Your parents have been cleaning up his messes for years, but this latest one? This is why they need you to take the fall. They need a scapegoat big enough to cover everyone's sins." "Wait," I hissed, but she was already walking away. "Check the footage from December 15th, she called back softly. "Conference room 3. And Joanna, trust no one, not even me."
I plugged in the USB drive with trembling fingers. The security footage was extensive, but I found December 15th quickly. The timestamp showed 11 p.m., well after official business hours. In conference room 3, my father sat across from 2 men I didn't recognize. Their faces were hard, their suits expensive but somehow menacing. Mike was there too, looking like he might vomit at any moment. The audio was muffled but audible. "Your son owes our employers significant money," one of the men said calmly. "We've been patient, Mr. Wellington, but patience has limits."
"I understand," my father replied, his usual commanding presence diminished. "We're restructuring some assets. You'll have your money within the month."
"You'll have it within the week," the man corrected.
"Or we'll start collecting in other ways. Your family has such a lovely reputation. It would be unfortunate if certain information about your business practices became public."
The video jumped to another date, this one showing Lillian and my father in his office. She was pacing, agitated. "You can't pin this on me, Martin. I've done everything you asked. Cooked the books, created the shell companies, managed the offshore accounts. I'm not taking the fall for Mike's gambling debts." "No one's taking any fall," my father said smoothly, pulling her into an embrace. "We have a solution. Joanna's been snooping around. We'll let her find enough to think she's uncovered something big, then flip the narrative. She becomes the embezzler, we become the victims. Clean slate."
"And if she fights back?" Lillian asked.
"Then we destroy her so thoroughly that no one will ever believe a word she says." I copied the files onto multiple drives, my mind racing. This wasn't just about financial fraud anymore. This was about organized crime connections, gambling debts, and a conspiracy that used me as a sacrificial lamb to save everyone else. The scope of it made me dizzy. I left the library, quickly, constantly checking over my shoulder. The motel was no longer safe, so I'd taken to sleeping in my car, moving to a different location each night. Tonight's spot was a truck stop outside the city, the kind of place where no one asked questions if you kept to yourself. I was reviewing the footage on my laptop when headlights flooded my car. 2 vehicles boxed me in, and I recognized the men from the motel break-in approaching. There was nowhere to run this time. I locked the doors futilely as one of them tapped on the window with what looked like a police badge.
Miss Wellington, we're private investigators hired by your family. They're concerned about your welfare. Would you please step out of the vehicle?
I'm fine right here.
I called back, frantically uploading files to a cloud server as I talked.
I'm afraid we must insist. The man's tone remained professional, but his partner was already trying the passenger door. That's when another car screeched into the lot. Luke Patterson jumped out looking terrified but determined. Joanna, drive. Follow me. I didn't need to be told twice. I started the engine and threw it in reverse, clipping one of their vehicles as I spun out. Luke's taillights led me on a wild chase through back roads I didn't know existed. 20 minutes later, we pulled into an abandoned warehouse district.
What are you doing here?
I gasped as we both got out of our cars. I couldn't live with myself, Luke said, running his hands through his hair. After we talked, they brought me in for questioning. Made me sign things threatened my job. But then I overheard something. They're not just trying to discredit you, Joanna. I heard your dad on a call. He said something about permanent solutions if you didn't back down. My blood ran cold. You think they'd actually... I don't know what to think anymore, but I know you're not safe. He handed me a bundle of cash. It's not much, but it's untraceable. And here. He gave me a cheap prepaid phone. My number's already programmed. I still have access to the company systems for another day or two before they realize I'm helping you. What do you need? Everything, I said desperately. Financial records, emails, anything that proves what they're doing. And Luke, there's more. Mike's in debt to organized crime. That's what this is really about.
His eyes widened. That explains the visitors. We've had some rough-looking people coming to see your father.
Security was told to give them full access, no questions asked. Can you get me the security logs, visitor records? I'll try. But Joanna, you need more than evidence now. You need protection. Have you contacted the FBI? With what phone, what email, they're monitoring everything. I felt tears of frustration building. Every lawyer I've called suddenly can't take my case. Every friend I've reached out to has been warned off. They've isolated me completely. Not completely, Luke said firmly. I've been talking to some of the lower-level employees, the ones who've suspected something was off for years but were too scared to speak up. If you can guarantee protection, some might be willing to talk. A text buzzed on my regular phone, the one I knew they were tracking. It was from Katie. Dad knows about Luke. Get away from him now. They're coming. I showed Luke the message. His face went pale, but he squared his shoulders. Go. I'll deal with them. There's a motel on Route 9 that takes cash, no questions asked. Check in under a fake name. I'll contact you tomorrow if I can. Luke, I can't ask you to. You didn't ask. I volunteered. Now go. I drove away, watching in my rearview mirror as several black SUVs converged on the warehouse. Luke stood waiting for them, hands visible, playing the part of the concerned colleague just trying to help. I prayed his act would be convincing enough to keep him safe. The Route 9 motel was even seedier than the last one, but anonymity was worth more than comfort now. I checked in under the name Sarah Smith, paying cash for 3 nights up front. The room smelled like mildew and broken dreams, but it had a working deadbolt and a view of the parking lot. I spent the night organizing everything I'd gathered. Financial records showing millions in laundered money. Security footage of criminal meetings. Evidence of Mike's gambling debts being paid with embezzled funds. Lillian's files revealed shell companies registered to addresses that didn't exist. Invoices for services never performed, and a complex web of transactions designed to hide the movement of dirty money. But it still wasn't enough. I needed someone with authority to listen, someone beyond my parents' reach. and I needed them fast before the Wellington's permanent solution found me. As dawn broke on January 4th, I made a decision. If the official channels were closed to me, I'd have to find an unofficial one. Somewhere in the FBI or IRS, there had to be someone who couldn't be bought, someone who'd listen to what I'd discovered. I just had to stay alive long enough to find them. The prepaid phone Luke had given me buzzed at 3 a.m. His voice was strained barely above a whisper. "They know I helped you. I'm at the office pretending to work late. They've got cybersecurity trying to track your digital footprint. You need to destroy any devices you've used to upload files." "Luke, get out of there," I urged, sitting up in the lumpy motel bed. "Not yet. I'm copying everything I can. Joanna, your mother, hired a team of hackers. Not just regular IT security, but black hats who specialize in destroying people digitally. They're trying to break into your cloud storage." He paused and I heard typing. "I'm sending you coordinates. There's someone you need to meet tomorrow. FBI, but off the books. Her name is Agent Sarah Mitchell. She's been investigating your father's connections for 2 years, but could never get enough evidence. Don't contact her directly. Just be at those coordinates at noon." The line went dead. I stared at the coordinates, memorizing them before destroying the message. It was a rest stop 50 miles north. Public enough to be safe, but isolated enough for a private conversation. I spent the remaining hours until dawn creating new encrypted backups, scattering them across obscure cloud services, and preparing a dead man's switch that would release everything if I didn't check in every 24 hours. The morning news brought fresh horror. Mike had given an interview to a business channel sitting in our father's office, looking every inch the concerned brother. "We're just heartbroken," he said, managing to squeeze out what looked like genuine tears. Joanna was always troubled, always jealous of our parents' success. We tried to help her, got her the best therapists, but sometimes people just break. The interviewer clearly fed questions in advance, asked about the embezzlement allegations. Mike's response was masterful in its manipulation. "We've discovered she'd been siphoning funds for months, maybe years. False vendors, inflated invoices, the whole thing. The FBI is involved now. We just want her to get help and return what she stole." I threw my laptop against the wall in rage, immediately regretting it as the screen cracked. They weren't just framing me. They were taking my exact discoveries and attributing them to me. Every piece of evidence I'd gathered could now be twisted to support their narrative. A knock at the door made me freeze. "Housekeeping?" a woman's voice called. "No, thank you," I replied, but the knocking persisted. "Ma'am, I need to check the smoke detector. State regulations." Something in her tone was off. I grabbed my bag and laptop, slipping out the bathroom window for the second time in as many days. As I crouched behind a dumpster, I saw the door splinter open. 3 men entered, definitely not housekeeping. One of them spoke into a radio. "Room's empty." "She was here recently. Coffee's still warm." I crept to my car, keeping low, and managed to start it and pull away before they noticed. In my rearview mirror, I saw them running to the parking lot, one pointing at my license plate. I had maybe a 5-minute head start. The next hour was a blur of back roads and constant terror. Every car behind me could be them. Every helicopter overhead might be searching. I ditched my car at a used car lot, leaving the keys in the ignition, and used some of Luke's cash to buy a beat-up Honda from a seller who didn't ask for ID. I reached the rest stop, early parking where I could see all the entrances. At exactly noon, a woman in running gear jogged past my car, dropping something as she went. I waited 5 minutes before retrieving it, a burner phone with a single text. "Blue sedan, north end of lot. Come alone." Agent Sarah Mitchell looked exhausted, like someone who'd been fighting a losing battle for too long. Her eyes swept the parking lot constantly as I got into her car. "You're either very brave or very stupid," she said without preamble. The Wellington name has a lot of weight in law enforcement.
I have evidence. I started, but she held up a hand.
I know what you have. The question is whether it's enough to take down an operation this sophisticated. She pulled out a tablet showing me a complex web of connections. Your father's been on our radar for years. Money laundering, tax evasion connections to organized crime. But he's careful and he's protected. Half the judges in this state have taken campaign contributions from Wellington shell companies. So you can't help me? My heart sank. I didn't say that. Your evidence combined with what we have might be enough. But Joanna, testifying against your family means entering witness protection. Your old life would be completely over. Are you prepared for that? Before I could answer, her radio crackled. All units be advised. Silver Honda license plate. My blood froze as she read out my new car's plate number. Wanted for questioning an embezzlement case. Approach with caution. Mitchell looked at me sharply. How did they get that plate so fast?
They must have cameras at the lot where I bought it. These aren't just my parents anymore. They've got professional help. I felt the walls closing in. Get out, Mitchell said urgently. Take the woods behind the rest stop. There's a ranger station 2 miles north. I'll meet you there in an hour. Go. I ran, crashing through underbrush branches, tearing at my clothes. Behind me, I could hear cars pulling into the rest stop, doors slamming, voices shouting. The woods were thick, disorienting, but I kept heading north using my phone's compass when the trees blocked the sun. The ranger station was closed for the season, but Mitchell was waiting in a different car. Get in the trunk, she ordered. They've got roadblocks up. The next hour was the longest of my life, curled in the dark trunk, feeling every bump and turn. When she finally let me out, we were at a cabin that looked like it hadn't been used in years. Safe house, she explained. Off the books. Even my department doesn't know about it. She set up a laptop and secure connection. Now show me everything. For the next 6 hours, I walked her through every document, every video, every financial trail. Her expression grew grimmer with each revelation. This is bigger than we thought, she finally said. Your brother's debts aren't just to Atlantic City mobsters. He's been selling information to international crime syndicates. Customer data, financial records, even government contracts your father's hotels have access to. Oh God, I breathed. That's why they're so desperate to pin this on me. There's more, Mitchell continued. Lillian Chen. She's been under surveillance for 6 months. We think she's been planning her own exit strategy, gathering evidence just like you. Your father must have figured it out. As if summoned by her name, the burner phone buzzed. Unknown number, but I recognized Lillian's voice immediately. They tried to kill me, she said without preamble. Car accident that wasn't an accident. I'm hurt, but alive. Joanna, your father's lost control. The crime families want their money now. He's promised them everything in the offshore accounts, but he needs someone to blame for the shortfall. You or me, and he's chosen both. Where are you? I asked. Hospital, but not for long. They'll try again. I'm going to the FBI tonight. All of it. The affairs, the crimes, everything. It's the only way to stay alive now. She coughed, sounding pained. Your mother was in on planning my accident. She'd rather see me dead than let the affair go public. These people are monsters, Joanna. Your whole family. Not Katie, I said defensively, though I wasn't even sure about that anymore. Katie's the one who gave them your location at the first motel, Lillian said flatly. Check your texts from her. Every time she warned you, they showed up right after. She's been playing both sides, trying to protect herself. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. My baby sister, the one I'd protected from family drama for years, had been feeding them information all along. Mitchell took the phone. Ms. Chen, this is Agent Mitchell, FBI. We need you to come in safely. Can you get to the federal building? I'll try, Lillian said. But they have people everywhere.
even in the hospital. A nurse just came in asking strange questions. "We'll send protection," Mitchell promised, but Lillian had already hung up.
"We need to move fast," Mitchell said. "With Chen's testimony and your evidence, we can get warrants tonight."
"But your family knows that too. They'll be getting desperate, maybe desperate enough to make mistakes."
She was right.
That evening, Martin Wellington himself appeared on the news, flanked by lawyers announcing $1 million reward for information leading to my location. "We just want our daughter to get the help she needs," he said, managing to look heartbroken. "She's sick, possibly dangerous to herself and others. Please, if you see her, don't approach. Call the authorities immediately. Dangerous to myself and others." I laughed bitterly. They're setting up justification for whatever happens to me. Mitchell's phone rang. She listened, her face growing pale. Lillian Chen never made it to the federal building. Her ambulance was diverted. It was found empty an hour ago. The implication hung heavy in the air. My father was cleaning house, eliminating anyone who could testify against him. And I was next on the list.
"We need more than evidence now," Mitchell said grimly.
"We need witnesses willing to testify. You said Luke Patterson was helping you." I tried the burner phone Luke had given me. It went straight to voicemail. His regular phone was disconnected. A quick search of social media showed worried posts from his wife. Luke had never come home from the office. "They're eliminating everyone," I whispered. "Anyone who might support my story." "Not everyone," Mitchell said firmly. "There are employees, investors, people your father can't just disappear. We need to find them before he silences them, too." She pulled up employment records. Who else might have noticed the fraud? I thought desperately. Marshall Chen in accounting, but he's Lillian's cousin. If she's gone, there's Barbara in payroll. She questioned some of the vendor payments last year. And Douglas, the former CFO I replaced. Dad forced him into early retirement, but he might talk. "We'll need to move carefully," Mitchell said. "Your father's expecting us to reach out to these people. It could be a trap." As if to underscore her point, my phone buzzed with a text from Katie. "Joe, please, just come home. Dad says he'll forgive everything if you just come home. This has gone too far. People are getting hurt. Please." I showed Mitchell. "See, even now she's trying to lure me in."
"Or she's genuinely scared," Mitchell suggested. "Your father's campaign is falling apart."
Desperate men do desperate things, sometimes even to their own families. I thought about Katie, about all the years I'd protected her from our parents' worst impulses. Had she been corrupted too? Or was she just another victim trying to survive? At this point, I couldn't afford to trust anyone in my family.
"What's our next move?" I asked.
Mitchell pulled up a map. "In 6 hours, the bank's open in the Cayman Islands. Your father will try to move the money before we can freeze the accounts. We need to act before then." She looked at me seriously. "Are you ready to take down your family's empire?" "They took it down themselves," I replied. "I'm just making sure they don't take innocent people with them." Outside, snow began to fall, blanketing the world in deceptive purity. Somewhere out there, my family was marshaling their resources for one final assault. They thought they'd hunted me into a corner. They had no idea the corner was about to bite back. The FBI task force moved at 4 a.m. on January 5th, coordinated strikes across 3 states hitting simultaneously. I watched from a secure location as Mitchell's team streamed live footage from body cameras. The first target was the Wellington Industries headquarters, where agents in tactical gear swept through marble lobbies that had once felt like home. "Federal agents search warrant." The words echoed through my father's office as they seized computers, files, and servers. The night security guard, someone I'd known since childhood, looked shocked as he was instructed to stand aside. The second team hit our family estate, just as dawn broke over the frozen landscape. I watched my parents' arrest on a laptop screen, my heart breaking and soaring simultaneously. Martin Wellington. The man who'd built an empire on lies and laundered money was led out in handcuffs. His silver hair disheveled his face, a mask of fury. Louise followed her silk pajamas, incongruous with the federal agents surrounding her. She spotted a news camera and immediately began performing. "This is a mistake. Our daughter is sick. She's orchestrated all of this. We're the victims here." Her voice carried across the frozen lawn, but the agents kept moving, placing her in a separate vehicle. The third location was Mike's penthouse apartment. They found him attempting to flush documents down the toilet, cocaine residue on his glass coffee table, and a safe containing almost $500,000 in cash. "That's not mine," he shouted as they photographed the evidence. "Joanna planted it. She's setting me up." But the real shock came from the fourth location. Acting on information from Lillian Chen, who'd been found alive but injured in a warehouse, they raided a seemingly innocent storage facility. Inside were detailed records of every criminal transaction, every bribe, every threat. My father, in his arrogance, had kept meticulous records, apparently planning to use them as insurance against his criminal partners. Mitchell called me as the sun rose fully. "Your parents are in custody. Mike, too. We've frozen all accounts, domestic and offshore. Joanna, it's over. You can come out now." But I knew better. It wasn't over. It was just beginning. The media explosion was immediate and overwhelming. Every news channel led with the Wellington collapse. Financial reporters dissected the empire's sudden freeze, noting how investors were fleeing, contracts were being canceled, and properties were being seized. The stock price of Wellington Industries plummeted 90% in pre-market trading. I was brought to FBI headquarters for protection and debriefing. As I walked through the halls, agents who'd been investigating my family for years looked at me with something between respect and pity. I'd brought down my own blood, and everyone knew the cost. Katie was already there in an interview room, her face swollen from crying. When she saw me through the window, she pressed her hand against the glass. "I'm sorry," she mouthed. "I'm so sorry." Agent Mitchell explained Katie's situation. "She's been cooperating fully. Your parents threatened to cut her off, destroy her fiancé's political career. She fed them information, but also tried to warn you when she could. It's complicated." "Everything with family is," I replied wearily. The next hours were a blur of testimony, document review, and strategic planning. Prosecutors arrived, stern-faced lawyers who viewed me with initial skepticism until they saw the mountain of evidence I'd compiled. The lead prosecutor, a woman named Victoria Chang, whistled low when she finished reviewing everything. "This is the most comprehensive financial fraud case I've seen in 20 years, she said. "Your documentation is impeccable. You did our job for us." "I was just trying to save my family's business," I said sadly. "I never wanted this." "They forced your hand," Chang replied firmly. "What you did took incredible courage." As the day wore on, more revelations emerged. Marshall Chen, Lillian's cousin, had been secretly working with the FBI for months, providing inside information. He'd been the one to help Lillian escape her would-be killers, hiding her until agents could reach her. Barbara from payroll came forward with years of suspicious transactions she'd documented, but been too afraid to report. Even Douglas, the former CFO, emerged from retirement with boxes of evidence he'd kept as insurance. "Your father destroyed anyone who questioned him," Douglas told me during a break. "I was lucky he just forced me out. Others weren't so fortunate." By evening, the full scope was clear. The Wellington Empire hadn't just been built on fraud. It had been a criminal enterprise masquerading as legitimate business. Money laundering for drug cartels, bribes to city officials for construction permits, tax evasion on a massive scale. Every luxury hotel had been a washing machine for dirty money. Every restaurant had been a front for something darker. Martin and Louise were denied bail deemed flight risks with extensive foreign contacts. Mike was released on a $5 million bond, looking haggard and defeated. I watched from a secure room as he gave his own press conference, throwing our parents under the bus with shocking speed. I was manipulated and controlled, he claimed. My father used my problems against me. My mother enabled it all. I'm cooperating fully with authorities to make this right. The reporters shouted questions about his gambling, the cocaine, the embezzlement. His lawyers hustled him away, but the damage was done. The Wellington children were turning on their parents, and the media loved every second of it. That night, Katie was released into my protective custody. We sat in a safe house, two sisters who'd been pitted against each other by parents who saw us as pawns rather than people. I didn't know how deep it went, she said quietly. I thought it was just tax stuff, maybe some bribery. I didn't know about the money laundering, the connections to organized crime. Joe, I'm so sorry I gave them information about you. You were scared. I said, though, forgiveness would take time. They manipulated all of us. Mom called me a disappointment when I wouldn't seduce the prosecutor's son for information, Katie revealed. She said I was useless, that at least you had the spine to be a proper enemy. Even when betraying you, I couldn't live up to her standards. We held each other then, crying for the family we'd never really had, for the parents who'd never truly loved us, for the childhood stolen by greed and ambition. The next morning brought fresh chaos. International authorities had joined the investigation. The Wellington hotels in Europe were being raided. Offshore accounts in multiple countries were frozen. The criminal organizations my father had been laundering money for were scrambling to distance themselves, some making threats, others offering to testify in exchange for leniency. Lillian Chen, recovering in protective custody, gave a televised interview that devastated my mother's remaining reputation. She detailed years of affairs, Louise's knowledge and complicity in the crimes, and the toxic family dynamic that had poisoned everything the Wellingtons touched. Louise Wellington knew everything, Lillian stated firmly. She was the one who suggested using Joanna as a scapegoat. She said her daughter had always been too righteous, that it was time she learned how the real world worked. But the most damaging testimony came from an unexpected source. Malcolm Reed, one of my father's oldest business partners, flipped completely when faced with his own prosecution. He brought receipts, recordings, and photographs spanning 2 decades of criminal activity. Martin Wellington corrupted everything he touched, Malcolm told prosecutors. He had judges in his pocket, police on his payroll, politicians doing his bidding. But he got greedy, got sloppy. And when his own daughter found out, instead of coming clean, he decided to destroy her. That's when I knew it had gone too far. By the end of the week, Wellington Industries had filed for bankruptcy. Employees were laid off, properties were seized, and the family name became synonymous with corporate corruption. The empire my parents had spent 30 years building crumbled in less than 7 days. I stood in the federal building, watching the news coverage with Agent Mitchell. "How do you feel?" she asked gently. "Empty," I admitted. Relieved, sad, angry, everything at once. "You did the right thing," she assured me. "I know," I replied. "But right doesn't always feel good." As I prepared to enter witness protection, I thought about the New Year's Eve party that seemed a lifetime ago. My parents had dared me to leave, thinking they were casting out a problem. Instead, they'd released the catalyst for their own destruction. Their empire hadn't frozen because I left. It had been rotting from the inside for years. I'd simply stopped pretending not to smell the decay. The summons came through official channels on January 15th. My parents, facing the reality of their situation, had requested a meeting with me through their lawyers. Against the advice of Agent Mitchell and Prosecutor Chang, I agreed. I needed to face them one last time, to look them in the eyes and understand how we'd come to this. The federal detention center was a far cry from the Wellington estate. Gray walls, fluorescent lights, and the constant sound of doors buzzing open and slamming shut. I was searched, processed, and led to a secure conference room where my parents waited shackled to the table orange jumpsuits replacing their designer clothes. Martin had aged a decade in 10 days. His silver hair was unkempt. His face gaunt, the commanding presence that had intimidated business rivals reduced to desperate calculation. Louise looked worse, her perfect facade cracked beyond repair makeup, unable to hide the dark circles and stress lines. "Joanna," my father said, attempting his old authoritative tone. "Thank you for coming." I sat across from them, my hands folded, saying nothing. Let them speak first. Let them reveal their hand. "We need your help." Louise burst out, unable to maintain pretense. "The lawyers say you're the key witness. Without your testimony, they don't have enough for the major charges. We're your parents, Joanna. Whatever our faults, we gave you. Life gave you everything. You gave me a childhood built on lies and crime." I replied evenly. "You gave me a family that valued money over morality, power over people. What exactly should I be grateful for?" Martin leaned forward, chains rattling. "We can make a deal. We still have resources they haven't found. Hidden accounts, property in countries without extradition treaties. Help us, and you'll never want for anything." "I already have everything I need," I said. "The truth, a clear conscience, the knowledge that I did the right thing." "The right thing." Louise laughed bitterly. "You destroyed your own family for the right thing. You put your parents in prison, ruined your brother, devastated your sister. Was your righteousness worth all that?" "I didn't do any of those things," I said firmly. "You did. Every crime you committed, every person you hurt, every law you broke. That was your choice. I just stopped enabling it." Martin's mask finally slipped, revealing the cold fury beneath. "You stupid, ungrateful child. Do you know what you've done? The people we owe money to don't care about FBI protection. They'll find you. They'll find Katie. They'll make examples of you both." "Is that a threat?" I asked calmly, though my heart raced. "It's reality," he snarled. "You think you've won? You've signed your own death warrant. These people don't forgive debts just because we're in prison." "Actually, they do," I replied, pulling out a document. "The FBI has been in contact with your business partners. In exchange for testimony about your money laundering operations, they're receiving reduced sentences and asset forfeiture agreements. Turns out they'd rather take a plea deal than pursue a vendetta against your children." Louise's face went white. "They're testifying against us." "Everyone's testifying against you," I said simply. "Malcolm Reed, Lillian Chen. Half your employees, most of your business partners. Even Mike's making a deal. You're alone in this. Just like you left me alone." "Mike wouldn't," Louise whispered. "He's our son. Mike's looking at 20 years for his own crimes," I informed them. "Conspiracy, embezzlement, drug possession with intent to distribute. Yeah, they found his side business selling cocaine to fund his gambling. Another family enterprise you covered up." Martin slumped in his chair. For the first time in my life, I saw him defeated. "What do you want, Joanna? You've won. We're finished. What more could you possibly want?" "I want to understand," I said, leaning forward. "How did you become these people? When did you decide that money mattered more than your children's well-being? When did you choose crime over legitimate business?" They exchanged glances, 30 years of marriage condensed into a single look. Finally, Louise spoke. "You don't build an empire by following rules. Everyone cuts corners. Everyone makes deals. We just got caught." "No," I corrected. "Everyone doesn't launder money for drug cartels. Everyone doesn't threaten their own daughter. Everyone doesn't frame their child for their crimes. You made choices, conscious choices, to be criminals. We made choices to be successful, Martin countered. To give our children advantages we never had. You gave us trauma, I shot back. You gave us a legacy of shame. You gave us a name that will forever be associated with corruption and greed. Then change your name. Louise spat. Disappear into your witness protection and pretend you were never a Wellington. But you'll always know the truth. Everything you achieved was because of what we built. Your education, your opportunities, your abilities, all of it came from us. My integrity came from me, I said, standing. My courage to speak truth came from me. My choice to do right came from me. The only thing you gave me was an example of who not to become. As I turned to leave, Martin called out one last time. Joanna, please, testify that we were good parents, that we loved you. Give us that much. I paused at the door. I'll testify to the truth. Exactly the truth. Nothing more, nothing less. The truth will destroy us, Louise whispered. No, I said, meeting their eyes one final time. You destroyed yourselves. The truth just documented it. I left them there, two people who'd had everything and thrown it away for the promise of more. The guards led me through multiple checkpoints, each door closing behind me, feeling like another chapter ending. Katie was waiting in the parking lot, bundled against the cold. How did it go? She asked anxiously. They tried to bribe me, threaten me, and guilt me in the span of 20 minutes, I replied. So, about what I expected. Do you regret it? She asked as we got into the unmarked federal vehicle. Any of it. I thought about the questions seriously. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that our parents chose crime over family. I regret that innocent employees suffered. But exposing the truth, no, never. The next weeks were a blur of grand jury testimony, evidence review, and legal proceedings. I testified for 3 straight days, walking the jury through every document, every discovery, every moment of realization. Victoria Chang, the lead prosecutor, was brilliant in her examination, building an airtight case that left no room for doubt. Mike testified too, trying to minimize his role, but ultimately confirming the essential facts. His plea deal would give him 7 years instead of 20, contingent on full cooperation. He avoided looking at me during his testimony, shame or anger, keeping his eyes fixed on the prosecutor. But it was Lillian Chen's testimony that sealed our parents' fate. She'd kept recordings of conversations, backed up emails, documented every criminal act she'd witnessed or participated in. Her deal included immunity in exchange for full disclosure, and she held nothing back. Martin Wellington orchestrated a criminal enterprise that laundered over $200 million, she stated clearly. Louise Wellington was not just aware, but actively involved in managing the financial structures that hid these transactions. They used their children as shields, their employees as pawns, and their reputation as armor. But in the end, their own greed exposed them. The defense tried to paint me as a disgruntled daughter, mentally unstable, motivated by jealousy and revenge. They brought up the therapy sessions, the anxiety medication, even a college essay I'd written about feeling pressure to succeed. But the evidence was overwhelming, my documentation meticulous, my testimony consistent. On February 20th, the verdict came down. Martin Wellington, guilty on all counts. 15 years in federal prison, forfeiture of all assets, lifetime ban from any financial industry. Louise Wellington, guilty on all counts. 10 years in federal prison, same asset forfeiture and ban. As the verdicts were read, I watched my parents' faces. Martin remained stoic, already calculating appeals and angles. But Louise crumbled, sobbing dramatically for the cameras, playing the victim to the very end. Outside the courthouse, media swarmed. Katie and I pushed through, protected by federal marshals, saying nothing. But Victoria Chang stopped to make a statement. Today's verdict sends a clear message. No amount of wealth, no family name, no social connection puts you above the law. The Wellington Empire was built on crime, and it has rightfully fallen. We commend the courage of witnesses who came forward, especially Joanna Wellington, who chose justice over family loyalty. That night in our temporary apartment under federal protection, Katie and I ordered Chinese food and tried to process everything. Our parents would appeal, of course, but the convictions would stand. The empire was gone, liquidated to pay restitution to victims and settle federal fines. The Wellington name would forever be synonymous with corporate crime. "What do we do now?" Katie asked, poking at her low mane. "We rebuild," I said simply. "Honestly, ethically. We create lives that mean something beyond money and power."
Together, she asked hopefully.
Together, I confirmed. But first we heal. We process. We learn to be people, not Wellingtons. As I prepared for bed, my phone buzzed with a message from Luke Patterson. He'd been found safe, had testified before the grand jury, and was starting his own accounting firm focused on financial transparency. "Thank you," his message read, "for having the courage to speak up, for showing us all that truth matters more than comfort." I typed back, "Thank you for believing me when no one else would." Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There would be appeals, civil suits, and the complex process of building new identities under witness protection. But tonight, for the first time in months, I slept peacefully. The empire had fallen, but I was still standing. And that was enough. 3 months after the verdict, I stood in a small conference room in Seattle, 2,000 miles from everything I'd once known. Outside the window, Mount Rainier rose majestically against a clear spring sky, its snow-capped peak a reminder that some things endure despite the storms that rage around them. My new name was Sarah Mitchell, chosen partly in honor of the FBI agent who'd believed me, and I was about to launch my consulting firm dedicated to corporate ethics and fraud prevention. Katie, now going by Catherine Mills, adjusted the projector one last time. "You ready for this?" she asked, smoothing her navy blazer. We'd both dyed our hair, changed our styles, created new personas that felt more authentic than our old Wellington facades had ever been. "As ready as anyone can be for a second chance," I replied, reviewing my notes one final time. The door opened and our first team members filed in. Luke Patterson, who'd relocated his family to Seattle to join our venture, brought coffee and his infectious optimism. Barbara Hendricks, the payroll manager who'd spent years documenting irregularities, carried her trademark attention to detail and a box of pastries. Marshall Chen Lillian's cousin, who'd risked everything to help the FBI, completed our founding team with his deep understanding of financial systems and unwavering integrity. "Welcome to Integrity First Consulting." I began, my voice stronger than I'd expected. "We're here because we've all seen what happens when companies lose their moral compass. We've witnessed the destruction that follows when profit becomes more important than people, when success is measured only in dollars rather than in the lives positively impacted." Our mission was simple, but revolutionary. In the corporate world, help companies build ethical foundations that would prevent the kind of corruption that had destroyed Wellington Industries. We would review financial systems, establish transparency protocols, create whistleblower protections, and most importantly, foster cultures where speaking truth to power was rewarded rather than punished. The phone had been ringing steadily since news of our launch leaked to the business press. Companies wanted to hire us precisely because of our backgrounds, because we'd lived through corporate corruption and chosen integrity over comfort. My testimony in the Wellington trial had become required reading in business ethics courses. The irony wasn't lost on me. The family that had tried to destroy me for speaking truth had inadvertently given me the credibility to build something better. Luke presented our first client, a medium-sized manufacturing firm, whose new CEO suspected financial irregularities from the previous administration. Barbara outlined our forensic accounting protocols. Marshall detailed our security measures to protect whistleblowers. As I watched my team work, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, hope mixed with purpose. "We're not just consultants," I said as we wrapped up the meeting. "We're guardians of corporate integrity. Every company we help, every fraud we prevent, every employee we protect from retaliation, that's our redemption for the years we spent enabling or ignoring corruption." That evening, I returned to the small apartment the Witness Protection Program had provided. It was a far cry from the Wellington mansion, but it felt more like home than that marble mausoleum ever had. On my desk sat 3 framed photos. One of Katie and me at our new company launch. One of my grandmother who died before learning the truth about her son's empire. And one of my team at Integrity First. My secure phone rang the one only a handful of people had the number for. It was Agent Mitchell, now a close friend and unofficial advisor. "How'd the launch go?" she asked warmly. "Better than expected. We already have 3 potential clients lined up for preliminary consultations." I settled into my second-hand armchair, feeling content in a way luxury furniture had never provided. "I have news," Mitchell said, her tone shifting. "Your parents' appeal was denied. The convictions stand. Also, Mike was released to a halfway house last week. He's in therapy, seems genuinely committed to changing. He asked me to tell you he's sorry for whatever that's worth." I processed this information, surprised to find the anger had faded into something more like pity. Maybe one day he'll find his own redemption. But that's his journey, not mine. "Wise perspective," Mitchell agreed. "Oh, and one more thing. The victim restitution fund from your parents' seized assets has been fully distributed. Over 300 employees received back wages, and several small businesses that were defrauded have been made whole. Your evidence made that possible." After we hung up, I made myself tea and stepped onto my small balcony. The Seattle evening was mild cherry blossoms blooming on the tree-lined street below. A year ago, I'd been preparing for a New Year's Eve party in designer clothes surrounded by wealth built on lies. Now I wore jeans and a simple sweater, lived in a 1-bedroom apartment, and had never felt richer. My phone buzzed with a text from Katie. "First day down, Mom and Dad's lawyer called again." I didn't answer. Some bridges are meant to stay burned. I smiled at her growth. The scared girl who'd betrayed my location out of fear had become a woman who understood that some relationships were too toxic to salvage. We were building our own family now, one based on trust and mutual respect rather than manipulation and control. The next morning brought our first official client meeting. Thomas Chen, the new CEO of Cascade Manufacturing, had the earnest demeanor of someone who'd risen through the ranks on merit rather than connections. He spread financial documents across our conference table, his brow furrowed with concern. "I inherited this mess 6 months ago," he explained. "The previous leadership left suddenly, and the deeper I dig, the more irregularities I find. But I need proof before I can act. More importantly, I need to fix the culture that allowed this to happen." As my team dove into the analysis, I watched Thomas's face. I saw something I recognized, the horrible dawning realization that people you trusted had betrayed that trust systematically and deliberately. But I also saw determination to make it right, to build something better from the ruins. "Mr. Chen," I said during a break, "what you're feeling right now, that mix of anger, disappointment, and responsibility, that's exactly where transformation begins. The fact that you're here asking for help to fix this rather than cover it up tells me Cascade Manufacturing has the right leader." "How do you deal with it?" he asked quietly. "The betrayal. Finding out people you worked beside for years were lying to your face. You focus on the people who choose integrity. I replied, gesturing to my team. For every person who chose corruption, there were others who documented it, who refused to participate, who waited for someone brave enough to act. Find those people. Elevate them. Build your new foundation on their integrity. By the end of the week, we'd uncovered a procurement fraud scheme that had cost Cascade Manufacturing millions. But more importantly, we'd identified a dozen employees who'd raised concerns that were ignored by previous leadership. Thomas promoted 3 of them to key positions, established an anonymous reporting system, and instituted financial transparency measures that would have prevented the fraud in the first place. "You've given us a chance to rebuild with integrity," Thomas said as we wrapped up our initial engagement. "That's invaluable." As spring turned to summer, integrity. First Consulting grew beyond our wildest expectations. We hired 2 more analysts, moved to a larger office, and established a pro bono division to help small nonprofits establish ethical financial practices. Katie led our training seminars, teaching companies how to create cultures where ethical concerns could be raised without fear. Luke developed our forensic accounting protocols into an industry-leading methodology. Barbara created whistleblower protection systems that became the gold standard. Marshall designed financial transparency tools that made fraud nearly impossible to hide. And I found my voice as a speaker and advocate for corporate integrity. Universities invited me to guest lecture. Business conferences featured my talks on the true cost of corruption and building ethical foundations in modern business. Every speaking fee went back into our pro bono work, helping organizations that couldn't afford our regular services. One evening, as I prepared for a keynote address at a major business ethics conference, Katie knocked on my office door. "There's someone here to see you. Says it's important." I looked up to find Douglas Harper, the former CFO my father had forced into retirement years ago. He looked healthier than when I'd last seen him, the stress lines softer, his posture straighter. "Joanna," he said, then caught himself. "Sorry, Sarah. Old habits." "Douglas." I stood, genuinely pleased to see him. "What brings you to Seattle?" "You do," he said simply. "I've been following what you're building here." Integrity. First is doing what I wished I'd had the courage to do 20 years ago. "I want to help if you'll have me." "In what capacity?" I asked, curious. "Advisory board, mentor, hell. I'll make coffee if it helps the mission." His eyes were serious. I spent my retirement thinking about all the times I could have spoken up, could have blown the whistle, but didn't, because I was comfortable. Scared. Complicit through silence. I can't change that, but maybe I can help others find the courage I lacked. "We'd be honored to have your experience," I said, shaking his hand. "Welcome to Integrity First." That night's conference keynote was my largest audience, yet 500 business leaders, compliance officers, and ethics professionals. As I took the stage, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. The pain, betrayal, and loss had been real, but so had the growth, purpose, and redemption that followed. "Good evening," I began, looking out at the expectant faces. A year and a half ago, my parents threw me out of their house on New Year's Eve for refusing to be complicit in their crimes. They thought they were punishing me. In reality, they were freeing me to become who I was meant to be. I told my story without bitterness, focusing not on the Wellington collapse, but on the lessons learned. I spoke about the employees who documented fraud for years, waiting for someone to listen. About the vendors who'd been cheated but were too small to fight back. About the investors whose trust had been betrayed by people they considered friends. "Corporate integrity isn't about grand gestures," I continued. "It's about daily choices. The choice to question an unusual transaction. The choice to protect rather than punish whistleblowers. The choice to value long-term sustainability over short-term profits. The choice to remember that behind every number in a spreadsheet is a person whose life is affected by our decisions." The audience was attentive, some taking notes, others nodding in recognition. These were people who dealt with ethical challenges daily, who understood that integrity was often the harder path, but ultimately the only sustainable one. My parents built an empire that seemed unshakable, I said as I neared my conclusion. They had wealth power connections. Everything our society tells us equals success. But they built on a foundation of lies. And lies, no matter how profitable, always crumble eventually. 24 hours after they cast me out, their empire began to fall. Not because of anything I did, but because truth has a way of surfacing, because employees with integrity found their courage, because law enforcement officials did their jobs despite pressure to look away. I paused, seeing my own journey reflected in many faces in the audience. If you're sitting here tonight wrestling with an ethical dilemma at your company, know this: speaking truth to power is terrifying. You might lose your job, your friends, your comfortable life, but you'll keep something far more valuable: your integrity, your ability to look yourself in the mirror, your knowledge that you chose to be part of the solution rather than the problem. The Wellington Empire fell, but from its ashes rose something better: integrity. First Consulting exists because good people refuse to let corruption win. Every client we help, every fraud we prevent, every culture we transform proves that ethical business isn't just possible, it's profitable. Not the kind of profit measured only in dollars, but in trust, earned lives improved, and legacies worth leaving. As I concluded, the audience rose in a standing ovation. But what moved me more were the people who approached afterward, sharing their own stories of ethical stands taken or regretted, of choices faced, and courage found or lost. A CFO admitted he'd been documenting irregularities at his firm for months, but hadn't known what to do. A compliance officer thanked me for giving her the courage to push harder for whistleblower protections. A young analyst reminded me of myself years ago, asked for advice on raising concerns about suspicious transactions. Trust your instincts, I told her. Document everything. Find allies who share your values. And remember, the temporary comfort of silence is never worth the permanent weight of complicity. As the conference ended and I returned to my hotel room, I found myself thinking about my parents. They were 3 years into their sentences now. Their appeals exhausted their empire. Nothing but a cautionary tale told in business schools. I'd heard through official channels that my mother had started teaching literacy classes to other inmates, while my father worked in the prison library. Perhaps even they were finding small ways to contribute positively, though I doubted they'd ever truly understand the magnitude of their choices. Mike had completed his halfway house program and was working as a bookkeeper for a small nonprofit, using his financial skills for good under strict supervision. He'd sent a letter through Agent Mitchell, not asking for forgiveness, just letting me know he was trying to be better. It was a start. Katie knocked on my hotel room door, room service tray in hand. Thought you might be hungry after that speech. You killed it, by the way. We sat together eating overpriced hotel food and planning Integrity First's expansion. We were considering offices in Chicago and New York, building a network of ethical business advocates across the country. The Wellington name might be permanently tainted, but the values we were building would outlast any family legacy. Do you ever regret it? Katie asked suddenly. Not the exposing corruption part, but losing our family. Sometimes I dream about Sunday dinners that never were about parents who loved us more than money. I grieve for the family we should have had, I admitted, but I don't regret choosing truth. We lost our biological family, but look what we've gained. A chosen family of people who share our values. Work that matters. The ability to sleep peacefully knowing we're making things better, not worse. Mom would hate that we're successful without her, Katie said with a small smile. Dad would be furious that we're giving away knowledge instead of hoarding it for profit, I added. We laughed then, the kind of healing laughter that only comes after surviving trauma together. Our parents had taught us through negative example exactly who we didn't want to be. In trying to corrupt us, they'd inadvertently forged our integrity in the fires of their own destruction. A year later, on New Year's Eve, the Integrity First team gathered in our Seattle office. We'd helped dozens of companies build ethical foundations, trained hundreds of employees in fraud detection, and recovered millions in stolen funds. Our whistleblower protection protocols had become industry standard. Katie's culture transformation workshops were booked solid. Luke's forensic accounting methods were being taught in universities. Barbara had been appointed to a federal advisory committee on corporate compliance. Marshall was writing a book on financial transparency in the digital age. As midnight approached, we raised our glasses of sparkling cider. The Seattle Space Needle fireworks would soon light up the sky, marking another year past and another beginning. 2 years ago tonight, I lost everything I thought mattered. I said, looking at the faces of people who'd become my true family. My parents dared me to leave, thinking they were punishing me. Instead, they gave me the greatest gift, the chance to discover who I really was beyond their influence. The courage to build something meaningful. The opportunity to transform poison into medicine. To redemption, Luke toasted. To integrity, Barbara added. To chosen family, Katie said, squeezing my hand. To second chances, Marshall concluded. As fireworks exploded over Elliott Bay, I thought about the journey from that marble foyer to this simple office. The Wellington Empire had frozen cold within 24 hours of my departure, but in its place, something warm and vital had grown. We weren't building monuments to our own ego or washing dirty money through gleaming facades. We were building foundations of trust, structures of integrity that would stand long after we were gone. My phone buzzed with a message from Agent Mitchell. Happy New Year, Sarah. Saw your conference speech online. Your parents would hate how you've turned their negative example into positive change. I think that's the best revenge of all. Not destroying them, but becoming everything they weren't. She was right. The greatest repudiation of their values wasn't their imprisonment, but our success in building something ethical, sustainable, and genuinely beneficial to others. They'd taught us that power came from money hidden in offshore accounts, but we'd learned that real power came from truth. Spoken boldly. Integrity maintained despite pressure and courage to stand alone when necessary. As the party wound down and the team began to leave, Katie and I stayed behind, cleaning up and preparing for the new year ahead. We had client meetings scheduled, training seminars to deliver, and a book proposal to finish. The work of building ethical businesses never ended, but that was the point. Integrity wasn't a destination, but a daily practice. A series of small choices that added up to lives worth living. You know what the irony is, Katie said as we turned off the lights. Mom and Dad wanted us to inherit their empire. In a way, we did. We inherited the understanding of how power can corrupt, how greed can blind, how lies can seem profitable until they consume everything. We just chose to use that inheritance differently than they intended. I laughed, remembering my mother's words about ungrateful children destroying their legacy. We didn't destroy their legacy. We transformed it. Every company we help avoid their fate, every employee we empower to speak truth, every fraud we prevent, that's the Wellington legacy now. Not the crime, but the cautionary tale that prevents future crime. As we locked the office and headed into the crisp Seattle night, I felt the kind of contentment that comes from aligned purpose. The girl who'd been thrown out of her family home had become a woman who helped others find the courage to do right. The empire built on lies had fallen, but the foundation built on truth would stand. My parents had dared me to leave on New Year's night, and 24 hours later, their empire had frozen cold. But in the aftermath of that winter came an unexpected spring. From the frozen ground of their corruption, integrity had bloomed, spreading seeds that would grow in companies across the country. Sometimes the greatest gift our parents give us is showing us exactly who not to become. Sometimes losing everything we thought we needed reveals everything we actually are. And sometimes being cast out of a toxic family is the first step toward finding our true home. The Wellington Empire had fallen, but I had risen. And that was the only legacy that mattered.